The movie begins in an old bar in Berlin, where there's a strange hole in one of the walls. The owner is an elderly man named Owen. On a stormy, rainy night, a man named Neil arrives at the bar, determined to see the woman living in the basement. Owen refuses outright, warning him that nothing but pain and suffering lies behind that door. Neil offers Owen €2,000 and explains that he only wants to say goodbye to his late wife. Despite the offer, Owen stands firm and tells him never to come back. After Neil leaves, Owen records a video message for whoever inherits the bar in the future. In the recording, he reveals that the place is home to a dangerous entity named Baghead, who lives in the basement. He explains that anyone who signs the ownership papers for the property automatically becomes her guardian. Baghead will do everything she can to escape and enter the outside world, and it's the guardian's responsibility to make sure that never happens. Owen also explains that the owner can never leave the property. If they do, sickness and death will follow them wherever they go. He says he's going to try to end Baghead's curse that very night, although he's unsure whether he'll survive. After finishing the recording, he heads down to the basement, where a horrifying woman with a disturbing appearance is tied to a chair. Owen sets the entire basement on fire, hoping to destroy the curse once and for all. Unfortunately, his plan fails. He burns to death, while Baghead survives completely unharmed. The story then shifts to London, where we meet a young woman named Iris and her best friend Katie. Iris is struggling financially and has recently been evicted from her apartment because she couldn't pay the rent. As she's trying to figure out where to stay, she receives a phone call from a lawyer informing her that her father has passed away and asking her to come to Berlin as soon as possible. The following day, Iris travels to Berlin and is horrified when she sees her father's burned body. Owen, who died at the beginning of the film, was her father, although the two hadn't seen each other in many years. The lawyer informs her that she has inherited the bar. Iris is completely shocked, as she never expected her elderly father to leave her anything. In fact, she didn't even know he owned an old bar. The lawyer gives her a tour of the property, and explains that the building and its facilities have fallen into terrible condition and will require a great deal of money to repair. Because of that, he suggests selling the bar as soon as possible, but Iris isn't ready to make that decision. She asks for some time to think it over and decides to spend the night there since she has nowhere else to go. Although the lawyer isn't happy with her decision, he reluctantly agrees. That night, Iris calls Katie and tells her that her father abandoned her years ago, so she isn't particularly heartbroken over his death. Katie insists that Iris shouldn't go through this alone, and promises to travel to Berlin to be with her. Around midnight, Iris is awakened by strange noises coming from the basement. Curious, she gets out of bed and investigates, but no one seems to be around. As she approaches the basement door, she notices mysterious symbols and spells written across it. However, she can't get inside because she hasn't received the keys yet. Suddenly, she senses someone else in the house. Startled, she searches for the intruder and discovers it's Neil. Frightened, she demands to know why he's there. Neil calmly explains that he doesn't intend to hurt her. He only wants to see the woman in the basement. Confused, Iris insists that no one is down there, but Neil refuses to believe her. He says his wife is waiting for him below. Neil then offers Iris €4,000 and promises to pay her even more if she allows him into the basement. Seeing such a large amount of money, Iris agrees, believing it could help her escape her financial troubles. She explains that she doesn't have the basement key yet and asks him to return the following day. The next morning, Iris meets with the lawyer and tells him she's decided to move into her father's old property instead of selling it. The lawyer is disappointed but doesn't try to change her mind. He hands her an old ownership contract, which she signs, officially making her the new owner. He also gives her the keys and a videotape containing instructions Owen left for the next owner. Later that evening, Katie arrives at the bar. Iris tells her about Neil, the €4,000 offer, and his claim that someone is living in the basement. Katie is shocked and warns that if what he's saying is true, staying there could be extremely dangerous. However, Iris believes they could make a lot of money from the situation. She assumes it's some kind of unusual attraction and figures her father must have charged people to see their deceased loved ones. A short while later, Neil returns, and the three of them head down to the basement. The room is pitch black, with two chairs sitting in the center. Neil walks toward a large crack in the wall and calls for someone to come out. Iris and Katie don't believe him and think he's talking nonsense. Then, to their horror, Baghead emerges from the darkness and walks toward them. The creature wears a burlap sack over her head and has a terrifying, deranged appearance. Baghead ignores Neil completely and moves toward Iris instead. To everyone's surprise, when Iris orders her to step back, Baghead obeys. Iris then tells her to sit in the chair, and once again, the creature follows her command. Neil then sits down in front of Baghead and hands her Sarah's wedding ring. She places the ring in her mouth, something Neil has never done before. As he moves to tie her to the chair, she suddenly lets out a horrifying scream. Her appearance slowly begins to change. Neil removes the burlap sack from her head, only to find himself staring at his mother, who died 20 years ago. Confused, Neil can't understand why his mother appeared instead of Sarah. He asks her why she took her own life all those years ago, but she responds only with vague and cryptic answers. After about 2 minutes, her eyes turn completely black. She tells Neil that she never wanted to have a child and that this is why she always hated him. Then she says she wants to give him one last kiss. Suddenly, she vanishes from the chair and reappears, pinning him to the floor while spitting water from her mouth. Iris immediately orders Baghead to stop and put the sack back over her head. With great effort, Baghead obeys, returns Sarah's ring, and disappears back into the large crack in the wall. Once they leave the basement, Neil realizes that his mother appeared because the ring originally belonged to her before he gave it to Sarah. He also admits that he forgot to warn Iris and Katie about the most important rule: no conversation with the dead can last longer than 2 minutes. After that, Baghead takes control of the spirit, making it extremely hostile and dangerous. Despite the failed attempt, Neil is still determined to see Sarah because he misses her terribly. Iris refuses at first because she's already seen enough, but Neil offers her more money and insists that he only wants the chance to say goodbye to his wife. Before leaving, he gives Iris his address and asks her to call him if she changes her mind. After Neil leaves, Iris and Katie watch the instructional videotape Owen recorded for the next owner. Owen explains that Baghead obeys only the guardian whose name appears on the ownership contract. She has the power to temporarily bring the dead back so their loved ones can speak to them. However, every conversation must end within 2 minutes. Otherwise, Baghead begins manipulating their minds and becomes violently aggressive. Owen also reveals that the more people use Baghead, the stronger she becomes. That's why no one should ever use her at all. Once she gets inside someone's mind, she'll keep pulling them back to the bar, no matter how hard they try to leave. Her only goal is to escape from the basement. After learning the truth, Iris finally understands why her father abandoned her years ago. He wasn't trying to leave his family behind, he was trying to protect them from the monster. She also realizes that the lawyer was the one who contacted her on his own and brought her back to the old bar. Terrified, Katie insists they need to leave immediately. But Iris refuses because she has nowhere else to go. She points out that Neil is wealthy and willing to pay any amount of money for one final conversation with Sarah. She believes they can earn enough to start a new life. Katie hates the idea, but she reluctantly agrees to stay for her friend's sake. The following morning, Iris returns to the basement and officially declares herself the new owner. She writes, "No trespassing," on the staircase to keep Baghead from leaving the basement. Afterward, she goes to find Neil and asks him to come back. Meanwhile, Katie rolls a large wine barrel in front of the basement door to block it. As she's about to leave, a framed photograph suddenly falls to the floor. It shows 2 strange-looking men standing together. When Katie looks at the back of the photo, she discovers it was taken in 1972. One of the men is named Otto, and to her surprise, the other man is the very same lawyer who arranged for Iris to sign the ownership papers. Katie learns that Otto owned the bar before Owen. After searching online, she discovers that Otto eventually took his own life after tragedy struck his family. Moments later, she suddenly sees Otto standing nearby, but he disappears almost instantly. Elsewhere, Neil tells Iris about his deep love for his late wife, Sarah. She died in a car accident, leaving him completely devastated. While attending grief support meetings, he heard about Owen, a man who was rumored to let people communicate with the dead for €2,000. That night, Neil, Katie, and Iris return to the basement. Neil gives Baghead an item that once belonged to Sarah, while Iris sets a timer for exactly 2 minutes. Instantly, Baghead transforms into Sarah. The last thing Sarah remembers is the moment just before the fatal crash. It quickly becomes clear that Neil lied about his intentions. He never came to say goodbye. Instead, he demands to know who Sarah had been seeing and who she had supposedly been cheating on him with before her death. Sarah denies every accusation. At that exact moment, the timer goes off. Baghead takes control of Sarah's spirit, and coldly reveals that there was never another man. The truth is that Sarah simply couldn't stand being with Neil anymore. Suddenly, the basement transforms into the scene of Sarah's fatal car accident. Iris sees Sarah crying in a corner and cautiously approaches her. Without warning, Sarah transforms into a savage monster, slams Iris to the ground, and reveals that she is now trapped in this place before disappearing back into the crack in the wall. Once everything calms down, Neil begs for another chance to speak with Sarah. He claims he only wants closure and refuses to believe what she said after the 2-minute limit expired. But Iris and Katie have had enough of him and order him to leave. Later, while sitting alone and drinking, Iris experiences a vision of her deceased father. She then witnesses what happened when Owen used Baghead to see his late wife. Owen apologizes for abandoning both her and Iris for 20 years, explaining that he had been trapped in the bar the entire time and was never able to return to his family. Every time he tried to get close to Iris, sickness and death followed him. In the end, Owen decided to burn the entire place down so Iris would never have to inherit the curse or suffer the same fate. But after the 2-minute limit expired, Baghead took control of his wife's spirit, and Owen was ultimately burned alive. The next scene takes place around midnight when Iris suddenly hears strange noises. She discovers that Katie isn't in her room, so she follows the sound into the basement. But instead of finding Katie, she sees her father trying to lure her into the large crack in the wall. Iris refuses to go near it, but then she notices that her father's face has become twisted and insane. Moments later, his skin begins to peel away, revealing that it's actually Baghead in disguise. Iris tries to strangle the creature, but things quickly backfire. Baghead transforms into an exact copy of Iris. Suddenly, Iris wakes up in her bed with a rope tightly wrapped around her neck, and a key tied to it. Fortunately, Katie hears her scream and rushes in just in time to cut the rope, saving Iris from suffocating to death. Later that afternoon, the two women try calling the lawyer, hoping to remove Iris's name from the ownership contract, but he seems to have disappeared completely. On their way back, Katie worries about Iris's safety and begs her to leave the place immediately. Iris refuses because she doesn't want to return to the empty life she had before. She even accuses Katie of being jealous now that she owns valuable property. Hurt by the accusation, Katie packs her things and leaves the house. Despite their argument, she still cares deeply about her best friend, so she heads to Otto's abandoned house. Inside, she finds documents and papers showing how desperately he tried to escape the curse. Meanwhile, Iris returns to the basement and uses Baghead's power to speak with her father. He tells her that he wanted the bar to burn down and intentionally left no will because he never wanted her to become involved with the curse. Iris angrily confronts him for keeping the truth from her all these years, but he apologizes, explaining that he was never able to leave the place to see her. Before disappearing, he begs her never to summon him again. Heartbroken, Iris goes upstairs and tries to burn the ownership contract, but no matter what she does, the paper refuses to catch fire. That's when she realizes she's trapped there because of the choice she made. A short time later, Katie returns to the bar and repeatedly calls out for Iris, but gets no response because Iris is unconscious in one of the rooms. Assuming her friend is in the basement, Katie heads downstairs, only to come face to face with Baghead. Some of Otto's papers fall from her hands, and Baghead swallows them. As a result, Otto temporarily returns from the dead. Katie asks him who Baghead really is. Otto explains that 400 years ago, there was a cult known as the Brotherhood. They discovered a woman with the power to summon the dead. They tried to exploit her abilities, but when she refused, they accused her of witchcraft and burned her alive while she was tied to a stake. She rose from the dead seeking revenge and slaughtered countless people. Eventually, the Brotherhood imprisoned her beneath the earth using powerful black magic rituals. Centuries later, their descendants reopened her tomb to use her powers once again. But every time someone used her, she grew even stronger, and everyone who tried to control her ultimately ended up dead. As Katie listens to the story, the 2-minute limit expires, allowing Baghead to take control of Otto's spirit. When Katie tries to escape, the basement door slams shut, trapping her inside. The next morning, Iris wakes up to the sound of Katie desperately calling for help from the basement. Terrified, she rushes downstairs and hears Katie's voice coming from beyond the massive crack in the wall. Despite her father's warning to stay away from it, Iris enters the opening to save her friend. Inside, she discovers a deep underground cavern. She keeps walking until she finally finds Katie. But as they attempt to leave, Iris suddenly notices Katie's real corpse lying on the ground. She realizes the person she had been following was actually Baghead disguised as her friend. The creature immediately attacks, but Iris manages to escape through the crack. At that exact moment, Neil arrives and pulls her away from the danger. Once they're back upstairs, he gives her a few pills, claiming they'll help calm her down. Iris takes them and tells him that no one will ever use Baghead again, meaning the creature will eventually lose all of her power. Suddenly, Iris begins feeling dizzy. Seeing this, Neil tells her to get some rest. Later that night, Iris wakes up and realizes it's already dark outside. She rushes to the basement after hearing Neil talking to someone. There, she discovers that Neil is making a deal with Baghead. He offers to become her new guardian in exchange for being able to stay connected with Sarah for the rest of his life. He even writes his name on the ownership contract, but it instantly disappears because Iris is still alive. Baghead then transforms into Sarah and reveals that she was pregnant when she died. She tells Neil that he was reckless and deeply insecure, which made her afraid of him and determined to leave him. She also reveals that he secretly drugged her to keep her calm. In a panic, she ran to her car while emotionally unstable, which ultimately led to the fatal accident. Overcome with guilt, Neil breaks down in tears. But Sarah tells him they can still be together, only if Iris is no longer alive. Neil insists that he's not a murderer, but Sarah replies that he is the one responsible for killing both her and their unborn child. At that moment, Neil notices Iris listening to the entire conversation and immediately chases after her. Iris runs to her room and tries to call the police, only to discover that her phone is dead. She flees to the rooftop, but Neil catches up with her. She desperately tries to reason with him, explaining that the woman he was talking to isn't really Sarah, it's Baghead manipulating him. But Neil refuses to listen and violently attacks her. Iris manages to break free and tries to climb down, but Neil shoves her off the roof. She falls to her death in a devastating scene. Neil then carries her body into the basement, and gives Baghead his phone so she can bring Iris back, allowing her to transfer ownership of the property to him. Baghead swallows the phone, and Iris's spirit soon appears. Neil apologizes for killing her and explains that he only did it so he could become Baghead's guardian and be reunited with Sarah. He then asks Iris's spirit to transfer ownership of the bar to him. Instead, Iris's spirit thanks him with an eerie smile for setting her free. She explains that even though she is dead, her name is still on the ownership contract. Since her spirit now exists inside Baghead's body, she has become her own guardian. That means she's finally free to leave the basement. Neil is completely confused, but Baghead suddenly attacks him. She first transforms into Neil's mother and breaks both of his arms. Then she takes Sarah's form and repeatedly slams his head against the floor. Finally, she transforms into Iris, grabs a chair, and beats him to death. In the final scene, Baghead burns the ownership contract along with the bar itself before walking away from the basement forever. No one can control or imprison her anymore. She is now her own guardian, completely free to roam the world wherever she pleases. And that's how the movie ends. Thanks for watching. Don't forget that your opinion matters to us, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel.